Good, sir. How are you? Kids all situated. Yep, they're in place. How are you doing?
Good morning, everybody. I'm very excited about the lesson we have this morning, so I just want to take a quick moment to tell you about how this came to be. Several years ago, my father-in-law, Tim, told me about a Sunday school lesson series that he had done for his home church in Troy, Ohio. And I believe it was 12 weeks, something like that, multi-week series on Christian ethics. And he brings a unique perspective as a longtime elder and also as a longtime physician on some of those topics that we may know something about, but maybe don't quite fully understand how it relates to our walk and our beliefs as Christians. And so I thought, boy, I really want to hear this. And my best way of doing that was to get him to come down to our church at the time in Clarksville, Tennessee. And he condensed that multi-week series down into 3 quick lessons: Sunday school, the sermon, and the evening service. And so obviously we didn't get to hear quite as many of the details as he would have put into an 8-week series, but it was a really special event for us to get to learn some new things, like I said, from a Christian perspective. And so at the time, of course, we didn't have our daughter. Now it's quite a bit easier to get him to come down and visit because we have Grace. So it was super easy to get him to come down here, and he graciously agreed to give us that same series of lessons that he gave our church in Clarksville. So I hope you enjoy it.
It's green. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you. the technology. That's part of what we're going to talk about a little bit. The technology keeps changing, and the technology provides challenges to the Christian. I see technology in medicine daily. And as I was saying, we're grateful. You are an important part of our lives because of Hannah, Dallas, and Grace. And so I was delighted to be able to come down and hopefully share some encouragement with you from God's Word. We're going to talk this morning about the sanctity of the home. The home is so very important. That is why Donna and I are here. All jokes aside about Grace, it is about our family. The reason I'm here this morning is we're all part of the family of God, and that is so critically important. For the sermon or for the lesson, we're going to talk about the sanctity of life, that God-given life. And what we call sanctity, we talk about that holiness, what God had created, what God had formed in us. And then for the evening worship or time together, I hope, Lord willing, that we share about the sanctity of the body. So that's kind of the plan that we're going through. I'm going to use my phone as a confidence monitor. My credentials are, I'm only showed this one time, and I'm not going to show it anymore. Hannah and Dallas went to Vanderbilt. Donna and myself, we went to Vanderbilt. I'll let Dallas explain what he majored in. And I studied chemical engineering there. Then went on to medical, worked a little while, made oil, made gasoline, did a few other little things, and then went on to medical school. And during medical school, I picked up a master's in physiology, thinking I might do some research at the time, but decided that what I wanted was to take care of people. I've always been a very practical, whether it's engineering or the medicine, I'm very practical minded. So I hope that these lessons today are very practical. I hope they challenge you. I hope that some of you are different places in life. Some of you have faced different challenges. I don't know the church here, and I have no intention of stepping on any toes. But I do have every intention of sharing God's Word with you and getting you to think a little bit about life. What really matters, though, as far as my credentials go, is that I served as an elder for 15 years. As I'm at the end of my practice, and because of all that, I'm in private practice for 30 years now, by myself, and we have seen, I've seen a lot of changes, and the Affordable Care Act, without getting into politics, has made me too awfully busy. So as I'm winding down the practice and coming to the end of my career, I step back for a hope. I hope only for a short time. I understand you have new elders here, and I've talked to Dallas about that. Church, listen to your elders. They love you. They care about you. I would often joke that I did it for the money. It doesn't. They do it because they love you and they love God. So I would encourage you to listen to them as they shepherd you, as they bring you along. Why do we study ethics? Remember the ice bucket challenge from about 3 years ago? This was all the rage when I was in Clarksville talking. Everyone was doing the ice bucket challenge. And if you look at their website, they post that little thought that they do stem cell research, but they do it ethically. What does that mean to the Christian? What does that mean in terms of the sanctity of life, the sanctity of the home? You see, we have a whole lot of research going on. We have a whole lot of new technologies. The challenges are there. I didn't have, Facebook, and Instagram, The internet brought right into your bedroom when I was growing up. Life was a lot simpler in some respects. Those tools are powerful, they're good. They, like anything else, they can be used for good, and Satan can make them bad. What is ethics? So this morning I'd like to look at the sanctity of the home. Now the approach I've taken is the thought of threats to the holiness. Threats to the holiness of home. When we talk about the sanctity of life at the worship hour, we're going to be talking about threats to the sanctity of life. And in the evening, we're going to talk about threats. And I know it's Super Bowl Sunday. I have to tell you right now that I've purposely, I'm not shortchanging God any, but I have been conscious that the kickoff's at 5:30. So I'll keep it short, but it'll be challenging. I get asked all the time, "Doctor, how much wine's good for me, for my heart?" And I answer it as a doctor, and then I answer it and turn around and answer it as a Christian. You want to hear the doctor's answer? Be here this evening. The sanctity of the home and threats to the sanctity of the home. God has a plan for the home. It's always been the family and the family unit. He is the creator of the family. We see that in the Garden of Eden. When God sent His Son, He didn't have to use a family to send God into the world, but that was His design and His plan. He sent His Son into a family. Jesus emphasized the family throughout all of His teachings, didn't He? And Jesus, how many illustrations of families did Jesus use? You see, what is the main purpose of the family? There are a lot of purposes of the family, but I will tell you, as a shepherd who had worked as a shepherd for many years in the church, amongst the family of God, as a family of 4, Hannah's our youngest. She's the baby of the family. The home's main emphasis is spiritual. And that hasn't changed as I've gotten older. As Hannah has gotten older, my prayer, my purpose as a father and grandfather is a responsibility to my children, to Dallas and Hannah, to Gracie and the new one. There is no other greater responsibility that I have. By the way, we can't ask questions. This is a class. Keith asked me, well, you know, how do you handle, I forget how you put it, but you put it real cute, about a question, an esoteric question from Jeremiah or whatever, one of the minor prophets. And, you know, I'll be the first to tell. One of the first things I learned as a physician is, I don't know. I know my limits. A congregation this size, there's probably 1, 2, or 3 doctors. We had 4 doctors up home in Ohio, and we're very different. I'll just say very briefly, you have to go 2 counties north to find another church. We're in a mission area. Our preacher was unchurched until he found Christ. We have a fair number of the big area, the dominant religion, and where we are Catholics and Catholicism. We have quite a few Catholic converts, members who've come. It's a different flavor, but until recently, we only have 3 of us who are physicians, but they're probably physicians in this church. And ask questions. They will tell you, and I'll tell you, that I know my limits. 30 years of practice, and I'm still practicing. A doctor practices medicine, a lawyer practices law, Christians practice Christianity. Jesus said, practice what you preach. That's where that term comes from, is from the Lord himself. So ask questions, and I'll try to answer them. If I don't know, I'll put it to Keith or Dallas or one of the elders. They'll know, or they'll point you in the right direction. Children are a gift from God. We see that. Esau came with his gifts. The psalmist talks about the gift of God. Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Dallas and I were talking about children last night a little bit. You don't realize until you're a father, until you're a grandfather, just how precious children are and how much of a gift they are. Do you understand the gift they are from God? Well, what about ethics? When we talk about ethics, by the way, we're talking about, that's a term that's thrown out there in the secular world. The scriptures don't use ethics. What does God use? Truth. And what does he call unethical behavior? Sin. Lies from Satan. There's all different types of terminology, but all we're saying is that we're looking at what's truth, what's right, and what's sin, or what's wrong or unethical. So don't get tripped up in the terminology. How do we know what is ethical? Reproduction ethics no one can surrender the reproductive power outside of the family. Think about that. Think about what the scriptures teach about that. And you cannot go beyond the marriage. And this is an important concept because a lot of the day's technologies circumvent the family and they go outside the marriage. And God makes that quite clear. We'll see it in the Old Testament particularly, and the problems and the sins that result from it. Of course, we're all familiar with Hebrews. The Hebrew writer is very clear. Marriage is to be held in honor among all. And the marriage bed is to be undefiled for fornicators and adulterers. God will judge. What about Alabama? As a physician, I get emails and notices from the Centers for Disease Control regularly. So you'll see some information. It's a government agency that does an excellent job at tracking all the health and statistics and numbers in the United States. And they have it by states. And this is from the CDC for the state of Alabama. How many babies are born in the state of Alabama out of wedlock? Well, according to the CDC, 43.9%. Not quite half. That's staggering. If I talk to my OB-GYN friends, the obstetricians, it's amazing to see what they have to say about the number of babies. And we are in a state that's conservative by most standards. In Ohio, we're Midwest. We're typical Midwestern conservators. We're not much better than this 44% that Alabama has. I think we're very close. Look at the number of preterm birth rate. Look at the teen birth rate. 30.1% of the most recent numbers from the CDC. Not quite a third of our teens that have the children. Is there a problem that the church family needs to deal with? Is there a problem in our families? Satan is assaulting the home because if he destroys the home, what was the number one purpose for the home? Spiritual growth, spiritual teaching. And Satan knows that. If he can destroy the home, he tried it with Cain and Abel. If he can destroy the home, he can bruise the heel of our Savior by hurting the church. We have to be sober. We have to get up. We have to teach. We have to love. We have to expand. Any questions on the numbers?
These are live births. These are not.
Oh, yeah.
These are not pregnancy statistics. These are birth statistics.
Yes. That's an important point. The percentage are those who go on to carry their pregnancy to full term and deliver. It doesn't include the 7,500 children that were killed through abortion. In Alabama, 7,500 in Alabama. The Center for Disease Control. This chart is a cut and paste for the most recent data, which I think is 2015, yes, 2015 from our government. We flew into Atlanta and drove down. It was the closest airport for our connections. And lovely drive through Alabama. Very pretty through getting down here. And this is government data. It's probably pretty good. Perfect? No. But they do. I've dealt with the CDC in all my career, and I find them very reliable in terms of numbers and advice most of the time. You know, the 7,500 in 2015, there were 7,000. I didn't print the number, but there was between 7,000 and 8,000 abortions in this state. This state's very strict for abortions. There were 650,000 abortions nationwide. We're going to look at that during the sermon. I have one slide on the sanctity of, we're jumping ahead to the sanctity of life. No, don't apologize. It's a great question. I'm a numbers person. I'm an engineer at heart. But I love people, and it breaks my heart when I see people being killed. I see the consequences. I cannot tell you, I'm an internist. I take care of older folks, and I cannot tell you how many grandparents are raising their children or grandchildren. That's not what God intended. And I have a very, if you will, a select patient population. I'm very careful about who I work with. Not in a discriminatory sense, but in the sense that, if you won't help yourself, how can I help you? And that, in that sense, so these people, they're motivated to help. They're motivated to take care of their children. They're motivated, but they are so lost. I could tell you, in the thousands of patients I've seen over the years, the world is lost. I'll talk to them. There are 4 things I try to do, and I've said this before, I try to do with every patient. And I jump ahead a little bit. I try, if someone's dying or someone's having problems, serious, and that's mostly what I deal with. Tell your loved ones you love them. Say it. Ask for forgiveness. Give forgiveness. And do you know Jesus? Now, they'll shake their heads, yes, I'll tell them I'll love them. I try to get that in hospice. I do a lot of hospice, a lot of end of life, a lot of old folks. And they'll shake their head, yes, I need to forgive. You know how many children are estranged from their parents? There is a tremendous need for forgiveness. How horrible is it to die without forgiveness, without giving forgiveness, holding a grudge to your... I can't imagine holding a grudge against Hannah. She get put off with me? They were nervous. Dad, you're not going to embarrass us, are you? Oh, thank goodness we're moving in a little. We joke. You'll see, I think Hannah gets her mother's sweet personality and my biting tongue. And they'll shake their head, but when you talk about Jesus, and I'm talking to Catholics or people who haven't been to church, what faith are you? You know, we have to ask all these questions now. What faith are you? Donna works as a nurse. We're old-fashioned office, you know, just private practice. And my nurse is my wife. She's an RN from Vanderbilt. And she does these wellness visits that are required now. And she'll ask, what faith are they? What do they tell you? Oh, I don't go to church. Or, well, I did go to the Methodist. Or I did do this. Oh, I'm a Christian. Talking about the home, there are so many that get divorced, and then they remarry, or they don't bother to remarry. I'm astounded by the number of 60, 70, 80-year-olds who are shacking up, who are outside. They're outside their home. It's happening in Alabama. It's why you see numbers like the CDC prints. That's why you, brothers and sisters, need to share God's word to your neighbor, to your family, to your friends. It's a living faith, and it requires that we make some changes. So the CDC, you'll see some other slides from the CDC. We had the TV on. We don't have cable in our house. We don't have satellite. I flipped on the channel that has the news, with the local news over the, with rabbit ears. Remember those? That's how we, on our 32-inch screen TV in our house, that's not on. There's a reason, as a Christian, I don't look at that. Not that there's a sin in it, but ask yourself, what did you watch this last week? And we were waiting for the news to come on, and I pointed out to Donna, oh, Jane the Virgin. No, I'm not pushing this. That synopsis is directly from their website. And if you read that, that's ridiculous. That's entertainment. And I bet you I don't bet. I would imagine that the odds are good that there's people who watch that in this audience, or the CW channel, which I will tell you, as a Christian and as a father and as someone who has served the Lord's church as a shepherd, don't watch CW. Don't watch a lot of the stuff that's on. If you have a problem with it, get it out of there. You got a problem with, I didn't look it up. I would assume you got all the narcotic problems down here that we have in the Midwest. You have overdoses and the heroin. If you got a problem with it, you step away from it. You get it out of your life. You get it out of your home. Boy, Satan's wise. We bring this stuff right into our household. We put it in our kitchen. We put it in our bedroom. One of my favorite things as an elder, and I'm sure the elders here do it, was I tried to go once a week and visit every family. We're geographically diverse. 3 or 4 counties. We're not together. We draw people from a large area because we're the only church. We're a couple hundred. And I drive 2 counties over to visit people. And I wanted to be in their homes to encourage them. But it was so heartbreaking, discouraging to me, sometimes to sit in the home with the TV going, having a visit. And what's on their TV in their bedroom with 2 elders was so immoral. And it was very, very much just, it didn't happen a lot, but it happened enough. Sometimes I'd go out, and the other elder that I would go with, we would actually sit and have a prayer together for that person and for ourselves, because of the way they were living in front of us. How are they living in the world? Immorality is not a new problem. Genesis tells us about Lot and his daughters. You notice how Lot crept closer and closer to sin. He took the better valley. Our decisions, it's a whole nother lesson. Our decisions make a huge difference on things. Gender issues. I will just say, and I'll be glad if there's a medical professional that wants to discuss it, we can. There is no scientific evidence that someone's born gay or someone is born transgender. I didn't quote studies, or I can sit down and I don't want to be arrogant, but this is where God's blessed me with the training to be able to tell you that there are no scientific evidence for that. I did a survey of the literature, the medical literature. It is overwhelmingly dangerous to do gender reassignment. Yet it's politically advantageous to do it, and Medicare will now pay for it. If you're 80 years old and you want it done, the government, through Medicare, will change your gender. You can't. But it's covered. It's covered expense. I take care of mostly people who are on Medicare because it starts at age 65. God has no gender confusion. We see that. None whatsoever. What about egg donation? Egg and sperm. It's interesting. You can sell for a good profit. And they put limits. In a particular city, you can only donate 5 or 6 times, because you don't want half children to grow up unbeknownst to that they're related 50% and marrying. So their idea of ethics is to limit the amount of eggs that can be donated, so that you wouldn't get this incestuous relationship occurring without them knowing it. The other reason eggs and sperm are donated is to use in vitro fertilization, and we're going to talk about that. Because I know I've counseled many Christians who are contemplating, a handful over the years. It's not my area of expertise, but people really that want a family will look at it. So let's look at in vitro. I'm kind of moving along here. I want to leave a little bit of time for more questions. Questions before we get into in vitro about the transgender and the gay. The world will have you believe that you're born a certain way. The medical evidence does not bear that out. There's anecdotal, there's a lot of bad literature out there to prove their point.
What qualifies as scientific evidence?
Say what?
What qualifies as scientific evidence?
As a physician, as a medical scientist that I consider myself to be, it would be a double-blinded study. It would be based on, not on anecdotes, meaning a story here and there. It wouldn't be based on retrospective data.
Have they looked up evidence for homosexuality being born? I'm sorry. Have they looked up evidence? Is there scientific evidence for a person being born straight?
Yeah, there is, yes. In terms of, you look, a lot of times they'll go look at certain animal species and say, well, they do this or that. or one of the favorites is the guppies can be male or female, and that's, do you want me to give you medicine based on guppies? I will not, we don't do things. I'll be the first to tell you that I do not know things, what I know as a physician, that much. 30 years of practice, masters, all the postdoctorate work. I work hard at keeping up. That's why I stepped down. That's a major reason why I stepped down as an elder in 2017, was the amount of effort it takes me to keep up. I'm not going to finish doing a halfway job for the God's Word. And so the evidence is, if you would have told me I would be treating peptic ulcer disease with 3 antibiotics when I started practice, if you would have told me that there was H. pylori could live in the stomach and cause an ulcer and be a common cause of ulcers, I would have laughed you. I would have laughed at you and told you, get out of my exam room. I would have been nice and said, there's no evidence for that. Now I'm writing prescriptions. Because double-blinded, meaning the physician doesn't know and the patient doesn't know, and they're both blinded to it and the treatment's blinded, and you do go forward. An example is of hormones in females, real briefly. I don't want to digress too long, but we used to give I used to write prescriptions for women who were postmenopausal for hormones. It was good for you. It was good for your heart. It was healthy. It was a good thing to do. It kept your bones strong. It had all these health benefits. We killed women from heart attacks and strokes doing that. And somebody did a double-blinded study, the Nurses' Health Study, looked at tens of thousands, forward, double-blinded, placebo-controlled, forward, didn't believe it. Can't be right. Repeated it, bigger numbers. Nobody now writes for hormone treatment postmenopausal. Because I don't want to kill somebody. I don't want to hurt somebody. Yet we're going to talk at the sermon hour about taking somebody's life. Did I answer your question at all?
In a sense, yes.
Okay. Oh, absolutely. Right. Oh, the bias, there's all types of biases that go into studies. Unintended biases, deliberate biases. Again, I'm a numbers person, and I need to see the numbers. And I will change my practice, and have changed my practice when I'm shown the evidence based on God. God gave us that science. He gave us a mind. It's one of my, a lot of my colleagues are Hindus and Muslims. And their philosophy, if you're a Hindu, when I had cancer, I went to the oncologist. He was a Hindu. And he looked at me, somebody I'd known for a lot of years, and he said, Tim, what did you do to get cancer? Because in the Hindu belief, you get cancer because, or something bad happens to you, or something good happens to you because of your deeds you're doing right now. And he gave me a book on yoga and transcendental meditation to cure myself. I learned very quickly that what you believe affects the way you behave. India, which is 85% Hindu and 15% Muslim, they don't give money. On the world donation stage, why would you give money to the poor? Because they're poor because of sins they did, and the gods are punishing them. That's a world religion. I never thought I'd become so familiar with world religions as a physician. But it's interesting. I'd like to talk about in vitro fertilization, because this is in the last 5 minutes, and we can maybe have some question time. In vitro fertilization is something that Christians have come to me and said, Tim, Dr. Hickerson, Brother Hickerson, we want to have a family. We want to, we want a child. I get that. What family, that's part of God's plan. And we can't, we're having trouble, and we're going to, we're doing IVF. The technique, though, is an issue that the Christian needs to think about very, very carefully. And this can, when you're talking about reproductions, is that a 5-minute warning bell?
That's a warning, yeah.
Okay. The way it works is you take sperm, you take eggs, you in vitro in a test tube, you fertilize them, and you form an embryo. That's a living person. And then you do that a bunch, and you have a whole bunch of embryos. And then you take typically 1 or 2 of those embryos, they scale them based on the way they look, the blastocytes, and they implant 1 or 2 into the uterus of the surrogate. May not even be the mother. The father's egg, and the mother may be total strangers. That's where the donors come from. And they are plant for 2 to 3 days in a row. They plant, usually it's 2 embryos for 3 days in a row. There's a lot of issues. Who's the father? Who's the mother? Where did they come from? More importantly, what about all these embryos? They usually try to create as many embryos as they can for success. And in the process, you got a choice. You can sell them. Think about that. Who would sell their own child? But you can sell them and make money. They pay good. Good, healthy, they rate them. It's kind of like coins. You know how you got a coin rating system? Well, they have a very sophisticated rating system for embryos. And a highly rated embryo will fetch a good amount of money. You can give them to research. What do they do with research? Make stem cells. They destroy that life. Or you can freeze them. Now, the university, I have a slide, and I really, because of time, won't go into it, but it costs maybe $10,000 and $500 a year. How many years are you going to write that check to keep those embryos frozen? What happens after you're gone? Generally speaking, they're abandoned, and then they get destroyed or they get used for research. Is typically what happens. Because it's sterile, because it's in a test tube, because you don't see the immorality, doesn't excuse the lack of sanctity with the home. Again, this is a very emotional and personal thing, and I don't know the church here well enough to be able to say, hey, I'm stepping on toes. But if you or a family or loved one are thinking about it, we need to teach that.
Let me ask a question you may or may not know. It's not strictly medical. I've done reading, not research, reading, that indicates that in the case of a divorce, that you have to decide what to do with those frozen embryo and who gets custody of the embryo.
Right.
Which would indicate to me that in that case, life is recognized of the embryo.
Right. Yeah, we have the Congress has passed a law. If you kill a baby in utero, it is considered murder. But it's a woman's choice if it's aborted, destroyed. We have, when you depend, and we're going to talk about this in the sermon when we start out, how do we know what is right and wrong? Yeah, that is true. There's custody rights of the embryos. And it gets real sticky. If you got a surrogate, what happens when that surrogate decides that she wants custody? What happens if the biological father who donated the sperms says, I want rights to the child? And there's documented court cases about this.
So, what is the difference between that and adoption?
The difference is, one, the embryos, the ones that aren't used are destroyed. That's life.
The embryos don't get created until right before they get implanted. The things get frozen on eggs.
The eggs are frozen and embryos are also frozen.
They don't create embryos unless they're going to the plant.
I beg to differ. What do you... Okay. The embryos are often frozen. Again, this is right off the web page. We're running out of time, but the United States, well, that's for the egg freezing. You can do it both ways, and both ways are done. But you still have the issue of, is there donated sperm or eggs? And there's also the issue of, what do you do with the extra? You're just going to do one embryo and transfer one embryo and then stop? That's not typically done at all.
It's typically done until it's successful.
Typically, they do two embryo transfers at a time.
Both of them take, then you have two babies.
Two babies, if one.
One, or you continue the process until it's successful.
Okay. Well, we can talk about it. Class has been, the bell's rung, and we can talk about it a little more individually.